dynamite, I never meant to make you cry. Make your mind up.
Hello and welcome to this Ibrox, your Rangers podcast. We're back after a week off, and it's myself, Scott Paterson, your host as normal, and we are welcoming back to the pod Tommy McIntyre joins us again. Hi Tommy, how you doing?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. Great to be back on the pitch.
Good. Are you well refreshed, I assume?
I am, yeah. I'm looking here like a little villain with my black top on, just waiting for the cat to jump up. You know what I mean? Kind of that type of thing. No, it's good to be back.
Are you going out to deliver milk tray later?
To be fair, it's probably more a Caramac bar through the letterbox.
And also joining us on the pod this week, we're very pleased to welcome the Athletics' Jordan Campbell. Hi Jordan, how you doing?
Hi mate, I'm alright, yourself?
Yes, very well, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming back on.
No worries, I think it's been about a year, so I think you just launched actually when I came on, so I know you're getting Dave King on. I'm lucky I even get an invite anymore.
Absolutely.
Friend of the podcast, Jordan Campbell.
Just about on the list. So this week's podcast is brought to you by HHH Mortgages, the one-stop shop for your mortgage and mortgage insurance needs. Contact them today or when you next availably can. 01453887179 or via email hello@hhhmortgages.com. They're available via their webpage, which is triplehmortgages.com, and also via Facebook at triplehmortgages.com. When you speak to them, if you are smart enough to mention this Ibrox, myself, Tommy McIntyre, or indeed Willie Boyd, they will look after you very, very, very well indeed, I'm assured. And I've spoken to them recently myself. Very impressive service. So, Tommy, you have been a busy boy. Last week, caught up with Dave King and Laura Fawkes from Club1872 for a wee hour. Give us a wee recap on what happened.
Yeah, it was great to have been invited to speak to both Laura and Dave. I think the biggest exclusive was just earlier that day, David shot an 82 around his home course, which I'm told it was not that impressive. Personally, I would kill for an 82 on any course at this point in time. But no, we covered a lot. We covered, his taking over or leading the team, to use his phraseology, taking over the club and regime change, how dilapidated and surprised he was with the dilapidation just of the bricks and mortar, so to speak, within the club. We touched on Club 1872's legacy programme and the sale of the shares, why it's a tiered cost basis. We touched on some of the treatment of people like Pedro Caixinha, and the fact that Dave is, just like all of us, sitting hunched over the telly when the games are on live, just willingness to get over the line. So I would recommend, if anybody hasn't listened to it, please don't go and do so on our YouTube or Acast, etc., and let us know what you think.
Tommy, I'm going to stick with you because I like how you refer to how he was. It was quite obvious how keen he was to get things over the line, but also at the same time being very, very coy, not to get too carried away. He's looking forward to it just in the same manner as all the rest of us are, isn't he?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did ask him, obviously, instead of that 82, if he'd shot a 55, but he wasn't willing to engage me to any great degree on that. No, he's right, and it's probably worth us saying as well, everybody's hyped up. Nothing's won yet, and we just need to get those 4 wins in the bag, 4 more steps, so to speak. And he was absolutely right, and he was, very keen to come back on the podcast and speak to me once the season is over. And in his words as well, we all hope that this Rangers team goes down in history for the right reason.
Yeah.
Because the other reason is unthinkable. It's a really strong and clear message that was coming out, which is get the 4 wins in the bag. How pleasing it is, however, for us to be talking about a Rangers team, a title on the line, and it's all in our hands. If someone would have offered me that at the start of the season, I think I'd have taken your hand off at the elbow.
Jordan, I think 4 games down the line, 4 wins, all things being equal down the line. When the dust settles after that, Dave King will be one of the people that a lot of Rangers fans will think of and think, my goodness, thank God he was around.
No, definitely. I mean, as much as people, credit Gerrard and his coaching team and the players, they've done the business in the park. But I think the gap with Celtic when Dave King came in with the other investors, 3 Bears, I think you look at the gap, and I don't think anybody thought it was feasible without them plugging that financial hole year in, year out with their own money, essentially. So, if Rangers were, trying to fight Celtic with the Champions League revenue every year while aiding within their means, it just wouldn't have happened in this timescale. So, I think that he deserves enormous credit, as does everybody who's put in the money and fronted up, because it's certainly it's a bold strategy to continue doing that every year, especially when it's taking maybe 2 or 3 attempts to settle on the right structure. But they've invested time and money in Gerrard's his team, and obviously it's now the third season. It's now all came together. But no, I don't think anybody, when they're assessing this season, can just look at it in isolation, whether that's just 1 year or the coaching staff or in terms of building over 3 years. Like, this is not just a football thing. It's only been made feasible by the strategy, which people have criticised. But now I think you look at Rangers and with the potential to get Champions League football next year and how well they've done in Europe under Gerrard. It's a remarkable record he's got. I don't think anybody thought that it was even possible for Rangers. It was also the way for Rangers to get back into the Champions League, and then topple Celtic's financial dominance. The only way was to get Champions League football was to topple Celtic domestically. No one thought you could actually do that off your own back by, basically single-handedly taking the coefficient up about 10 places, I think it is at least. So depending on how they do this year, if they go quite deep into the tournament, they could potentially, overtake Ukraine and seal an automatic place, which would mean, if it's even possible to say, next season's title becomes even more important in terms of finances, because say Rangers qualify next year in the qualifiers and get into the group stage and then win the league, that's 2 years in a row. And if Celtic don't get it 2 years, you could be looking at that, the financial gap, and it's completely flipped on its head. And then Rangers are set up for the next few years. There's obviously still a lot of dominoes to fall there, but it's taken a lot of dominoes to fall to get to this point. So you can see it all coming together.
Just an encapsulation of that, actually, because I completely agree with Jordan there in terms of, I think there's been a surprising leap forward in terms of the European performances and being able to break through first to the group stages in the Europa League and then go beyond. And we still obviously have that to look forward to with Royal Antwerp. But the fact that can be done on a relatively modest budget, and in italics obviously, a Scottish modest budget, shows you the importance of having the right view of an infrastructure, which is, again, referencing that conversation with Dave King when they took over the club, not a single scout, not a single one on the payroll, even by affiliate nature. Now you've got an absolute dedicated scouting and analysis department. You've got Ross Wilson in there as well and Mark Allen before him. You've got a real clear strategy and vision of a singular club internally working towards the same model, which allows you to then go and source players who can pretty rapidly either embed themselves or have got a really sharp trajectory to being first teamers. And by and large, we've not made too many missteps in the transfer part of Steven Gerrard's reign. Yep. You can always point to Eros Grezda and stuff like that as well. But it shows you, if you get the component parts behind the scenes and infrastructure right, you will save yourself money in the long term, and you can move a little bit more agile and faster. If you compare that to other clubs in Scotland's business models, for example, when more missteps have been had, but they've had more access to money in the recent couple of years, they've been able to glide over the top of that. By and large, we haven't been. It made us just think smarter and think quicker. It genuinely cannot be overstated how important that is.
Tommy, the one thing from the chat that kind of resonated with me is, as soon as I heard it, and I felt it when I listened to Laura Fawkes speak about it, I could tell she kind of transferred herself back to when dilapidation was mentioned. As Rangers supporters, we're all extremely proud of our stadium and what it means to us to get back and forward every other Saturday, to walk around the ground as and when we can, even when there's no games on, to get the chance to just walk around and look at it in awe, to be perfectly honest with you. Dilapidation is a word that is used with buildings that are hanging by a thread. It's very, very hard to believe what Dave King actually inherited that day.
Yeah, and he was referencing obviously some of that. I mean, it's an amazing facade of a club with the bricks and mortar on Edmondson Drive, and it's an institutional facade for an institutional club, for want of a better way of putting it there. And when you look at that, I always think that the front of the stadium, Edmondson Drive, gives you a feeling of just how big the club is.
Yeah.
It's a grandeur that cannot be captured by a modern stadium in any way, shape or form, right? You can do all you want, bells and whistles on it, right? You can have an Allianz Arena and all that kind of stuff, or an Etihad. It's not the same, right? There's a legitimacy and a permanence to Ibrox that when you stand back, you look and you go, that's bigger than me.
Yeah.
That's been here longer. It will outlast me and it will outlast the achievements of any individual. That's the predication of success there. It's one of the reasons why I just love looking at the stadium as well. And you guys might feel similar. But yeah, he was referencing things like, I think they had to oversubscribe 3.5 million in terms of making repairs to the stadium and the training ground. There was, and to use his words, there were serious health and safety issues. There were things that just, this isn't we would like to. This is the council's coming in.
You have to.
The roof, for example, was well quoted at the time. And so these were things that were, you play it back the other way. If Dave King and the Three Bears, not a phrase I particularly like, to be honest with you, these gentlemen have their own names and they shouldn't be referred to as a collective of Three Bears, but I'll stick with it at the moment. But if they hadn't come in and be willing to put their money on the line, much like Jordan was referencing there as well, with the promise of nothing other than trying to save something that's close to their heart and that we all love, the council might have stepped in and went, no more games at Ibrox. And just let that sink in. You can't even play at your own home. That's a level of embarrassment that thankfully we were saved. But yeah, even Dave and his team were caught out by just how bad it was.
So everyone at this Ibrox is extremely grateful to Laura and Dave for their time last week. Tommy, I recommend that you can jump on to our channels and have a listen to that. It's a very well listened to hour. I recommend as a Rangers support we jump on it and have a listen. A lot of interesting stuff on there. So, not the weekend there, but the Hamilton game. We obviously missed the pod last week because we had technical difficulties. So we didn't get the chance to sort of critique the Hamilton game, which we won't do in a great deal. However, one thing that I thought was glaringly obvious going from weekend to weekend was how at the weekend, Jordan, we brought back Stephen Davis and Ryan Jack, and it just gave us a lot more fluidity to that three in the centre of the park.
Yeah, I think fluidity, fluency, that sort of word where it just seems less disjointed and rigid. They just, midfield, obviously, you always look at it and think you want somebody in there who's a cerebral type who's always thinking about where he is in relation to everybody else. And Steve Davis just comes so easy to him, But I think, I wrote a piece the other week, and I was speaking to people like Andy Little and Lee Wallace, and obviously Lee Wallace has seen him in both spells, obviously towards for one season before the financial issues, but he's seen both sides of him when he's came down to Southampton and then came back up, and he just says he's reading the game and just the way he goes. He says he's one of those players, that as soon as you play with him, you just appreciate him even more. Andy Little said that as well. He's not somebody that doesn't wow you every game. He might not do something which sticks in the mind, but everything's so neat, so tidy. And I don't think the thing that he gets enough credit for is, to me, one of the biggest things about this season and why it's been so successful is how Rangers have just completely suffocated teams. Now, it's lessened a bit in the last couple of months, obviously, when games have been a bit, teams have had wee spells, but it's wave after wave of attack, and the amount of times where teams will clear it or intercept it, and all of a sudden Steve Davis is 5 yards away from it. It's not that he's sprinting 30 yards. He's always making sure he's edging up and closing his space and just reads the game brilliantly. For a guy at his age to be so sharp over those 4 or 5 yards is superb. I actually tracked in. I tracked in. I was trying to keep fit during lockdown, so I ended up following this Northern Irish guy, and it turned out to be his brother-in-law. So that was handy. I think people. I thought I'd done a deep dive on his brother-in-law, but I don't go into that much detail. But no, he was just talking about how dedicated he's always been to his fitness. Ever since he was at Fulham as a young player. But you don't get to that age and still be playing this regularly without looking after yourself. Because I think people, just when you talk about the Hamilton game, people were critical of the rotation, and I never really a lot of that's hindsight. Obviously, looking at the result and being upset by it and thinking it's getting too complacent, but Like, I didn't see that. Like, Steve Davis had played 10 games in a row in 50 days. You know, you need to rotate, and if you can't, you know, Zungu, he made a start against St Mirren in the cup, but he only started the league game. So if you can't start him and you can't bring in Cedric Itten, who had been performing really well as an impact sub, like when can you start them if you can't start them when you're 20 points ahead against a team bottom of the league? Like, it seemed to me to be a sense. There was only 3 changes, and one of them was bringing in Glenn Kamara, who had also just been rested for the first time in about 2 months. So I think people, like, I obviously understand, you know, the fans, like, no, just full out, you know, no rotation until the end of the season, but that's misrepresenting, I think, slightly what this season's been about, because it's always been 1 change, 2 change, 3 changes. There's a core group of 14, 15 players where you don't really, you know, it might be Balogun or Hollander, it might be Kamara or Jack, but you don't think, oh, well, that's a drop. You know, they bring different qualities to depending on the opposition. So I thought that was a bit overblown, but, you know, Hamilton was by far, I think, the worst performance of the season. You know, had McGregor to thank for staying in it for so long. Obviously, you know, it was a bit of a blow at the end, I think, for everybody involved. But, you know, if you look at the game as a whole, I don't think you can really have any complaints with Hamilton taking a point. I thought they were really good. I didn't expect that performance coming, but they actually came in really press Rangers high up, and they struggled with. I know, like, Kamara, Aribo, Zungu, and were playing a lot flatter. It wasn't like Aribo was playing higher up, but I just think they struggled to play through it, and just never really got going at all, which is strange to say, because usually it might have a slow start, but they always come into it. Whereas, again, probably comes back to Steve Davis, that, you know, that control, him and Jack have got that relationship. They've got to just help dominate games. Jack coming back in has been a massive boost.
Tommy, we'll come to Ryan Jack in a second. Obviously, we'll need to refer to his wonderful goal on Saturday. I'm glad Jordan refers to Stephen Davis. I think a lot of people will remember how we speak with him a bit of regularity, because he's very seldom anything other than very impressive. It's easy to forget that this year the amount of football that he has played has been incredible. None more so than, of course, breaking Pat Jennings' record internationally. And I think that's sort of bypassed a lot of people because of it's international, so it's happening every so often, and he's away for 4 days, then he's back. But as Jordan quite rightly says, he's coming back to play 10 games on the bounce at a really, really good quality. He's quite the professional, isn't he?
I think it goes massively without saying, though everything you've referenced there I completely agree with. You know, people talk continually about Jermaine Defoe. Oh, he's in and around the squad. He keeps himself really fit. He's the ultimate professional. Well, Stephen Davis is playing a hell of a lot more football than him. Right, yeah. He's a bit younger, but he's also doing it on the international stage and setting records and still controlling games. And that's not a criticism of Jermaine Defoe. I'm just saying people don't tend to give Stephen Davis the same level of thought that way. But he's actually very well into his twilight years, so to speak, and he's still got the ability to control games, and probably more importantly with that presence, make other teams' midfields think about him. You're always in a good position if you're making other people think about you, because then they have to be reactive as opposed to proactive. They can't force their game onto you, which is particularly good at what is one of the things that Jack and Davis as a combination are particularly good at. You know, teams are reactive round about them, as opposed to, you know, being proactive. You know, not going to go back and run over the ground that Jordan's, you know, covered there, but Hamilton by and large was probably the worst performance of the season, and I say that because we didn't really massively create, and it was quite refreshing though from a Rangers support perspective that we don't gnash our teeth or start throwing barriers or anything like that or chasing buses. I mean, you know, by and large the reaction was, Hamilton could have very well have had 3 points there, to be honest with you. You know, yeah, it feels bad because we lost it in the last second, but a point's probably all we could justify, and even our manager is saying that. So it's nice to see that there's, you know, we can hold the candle up to ourselves that way sometimes. That should never be forgotten. But yeah, it was a poor performance. We didn't really get on the front foot. All of the players seemed to be off the boil at the same time. Rotation, I maybe think it had a slightly bigger impact than Jordan does there. But I do appreciate that if you can't rotate your squad and drop in a South African international midfielder who, let's remember, is still trying to impress because he's on loan,
Yeah.
then, when can't you drop him in if it's away to the team lowest in the league who've been routinely battered? Actually, strangely enough, that was Hamilton's catalyst result. You know what I mean? They've now, I think, won a couple or got another draw. They smashed Motherwell in the Lanarkshire derby the other day as well, though I think Motherwell got a man sent off. None of which was your question. Your question was all about Stephen Davis, and so I have wandered about the midfield and come back there just to play the square ball, which
Welcome
is...
back, Thomas. Welcome back, son.
Well, we're going back. My beard's longer now. No, you're absolutely right. Stephen Davis is an absolutely top professional and somebody who's viewed as being a top professional by other professionals, always a key indicator. He's done it at the highest level internationally. He's done it at the highest level professionally, which, if you like, is the EPL. Maybe take a position on that, but it's certainly robust. And we're very lucky to have him driving us forward. And him and McGregor round about the dressing room as well, and damping down tempers and making sure people are focused probably can't be overstated as well.
Tom, I'm going to stick with you because Kilmarnock obviously made a managerial change over the last couple of weeks, and it was Tommy Wright's Kilmarnock, of course, that came to Ibrox on Saturday. Thankfully, without a Kyle Lafferty, because it would have been sod's law. He started up front and maybe put the cat amongst the pigeons at the weekend. I was a wee bit concerned about there just being that natural kick that you get from when a new manager came in. I did feel that we were a little bit stuffy at the weekend initially, but I felt as we eventually got into our stride territorially during the game, I thought we were excellent, kept the ball well, and thoroughly deserved the 3 points come the end of the afternoon.
Definitely. I think I'm the same as you. You're always looking for that bounce from a team. But to be honest with you, as much as I don't have anything personally against Tommy Wright, he once argued with Neil McCann. So, he'll mend him and his team as far as I'm concerned. Right. So I'm very much a Neil McCann person, as listeners to the podcast well know. But yeah, I thought, there was no surprises from Kilmarnock. Reasonably well set up, sitting relatively deep, trying to play to their strengths, which was trying to exploit space in behind when they got the opportunity, which was fairly minimal anyway. I agree with you too. I thought we were slow out the blocks, by and large. Bit ponderous and maybe a wee bit tight, if you know what I mean, in terms of the final third. One of the threads running through the entire 90 minutes was some of our decision-making in the final third was horrendous, has to be said. And some of the touches as well, when the chips were on the table, so to speak. Joe Aribo, I'm looking at you for that touch in the box when Ryan Kent put you in. Notwithstanding the fact that you could have actually played it back to Ryan Kent, but that's neither here nor there as well. But a cold, it's February, isn't it? A cold February with the snow still coming down, turning into sleet. The night's starting to get a wee bit lighter, coming out of the darkness. Birds flying back from south, after the winter. The grass starting to grow, which means the gardener's going to start charging me money again. Another year passed where we've managed to stay alive in what is a grim pandemic, illuminated, I'm doing my best Archie McPherson, illuminated in amongst the Stramashes I don't know where this sentence is going anymore. With the
throwing random words here.
Exactly. I might get a job for the Athletic. But it was illuminated by
them in your locker.
Yeah, but they don't have to make any sense though.
I suppose that's how I get to that number.
Andre Plevin. It's no, not necessarily in the right order, but it's not a joke for the younger bears there. It has to be said. But yeah, illuminated by the one piece of quality on display, which was Ryan Jack's goal, and probably more importantly his first touch as well.
Jordan, I would suggest that Ryan Jack probably now has two candidates for goal of the season come mid-May.
Yeah, I wrote about that, just about the actual overall, the overall trajectory of his career as a midfielder, evolution, if you want to call it that, because, obviously, I think Pedro Caixinha, when he came in, said something the equivalent of, we want him to get the ball deep and break up and start play and break up play. But obviously, since Gerrard came in, he's a lot more box to box, and he's your sort of perfect number 8 for this team. But you look at the volley. Obviously, that was a spectacular strike. But he shot for distance up at Dingwall last season. I thought he was, that was right in the peak of his form last season, where he was playing just unbelievable football in every game. I think you could argue he was man of the match. Just so never losing it. Like, it wasn't even just playing safe passes, but I think like the goal you're talking about the other week, where he just came on against Ross County and got the ball in sort of right back position, and you just instantly seen him, open up his legs and start galloping forward, and like you don't realise how he actually looks a bit bigger as well physically when you see him. I don't know whether that's something they've been doing, obviously with the time off or whatever, but like the way he linked up, started the move, kept it, and then manipulated it into Itten, carried on his run, checked his shoulder, and then just took it first time. You're like, this guy should be doing this 10 times a season. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know it's asking a lot for somebody who is obviously playing in quite a structured midfield and doing a certain role, but like, you do think he's got that in his locker. He doesn't get flustered when he's in the final third. He doesn't get there enough for me. Like, I still think he could be freed up. I spoke about Scott Arfield. You look at he's obviously playing a different role, but he still does box to box jobs at different times depending on who he's playing with. I think Jack is as good as he is and as important as he is. I still think, I know he's 28 now, but I still think you could get another 4 or 5 goals at him a season. I don't think it's something they'll be making a big deal about or making a priority. I imagine they would want a proper attacking midfielder at some point, but I think he's a quality player, and the way that he takes his goals, you do think that he has got the ability to go to that next level and add that next string to his bow.
Tommy, we've spoken on the pod previously about just wee technical things that happen on the lead up to a goal. Instantly I'm thinking about the Morelos goal at Paterson when he lets it roll across him, then spins back and fires it in the opposite direction. The one thing that for me that made Ryan Jack's goal so special at the weekend was his first touch prior to his connection to rattling out the roof of the net. If he gets that touch wrong, I don't think he scores. He got it absolutely perfectly, so that it just nestled down on his boot, which meant the execution was perfect.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Although I'd probably go even slightly further, which is if he doesn't get the first touch right, it's not that he doesn't score, he doesn't take the shot on.
Yeah.
Because that psychologically will bobble up. He'll just try and get his body in front of it and try and play it off or play it back, or the defender will come through it. So, I think Kevin Thompson was referencing this in the commentary as well, which is the value, and we've all played the game to some degree, right? At some level, right? Very much looking up the way.
You about to claim that you've pulled this off 5 or 6 times?
Listen, I have actually scored from the halfway line.
Have you?
I swear to God, I scored in a. It's not fancy or anything like that, but I scored in a Boys Brigade League match from the halfway line on a red ash pitch. Let it bounce in front of me and smashed it over the keeper. I kid you not, that is a absolute hand up to whichever god you pray to.
Before kick-off?
That was a day before. There was no doing a pitch. I just written goalkeeper in the ash. Well, I swear, in a league match for the Boys Brigade, smacked it right over the keeper. I dipped right over the top of him. Anyway, neither here nor there. But yeah, I think Kevin Thompson was referencing that everything comes down to how good your first touch is. And if, just to broaden it out a little bit, whilst Ryan Jack gets tons of plaudits for that, I think his first touch has got a hell of a lot better. Coaching, agree with Jordan, more goals out of him would be amazing, take his game to the next level. If you are looking about the team and you're looking for a first touch master, Hadji will be in there for a fight as well. I get it. From a finishing perspective, Jermaine Defoe jump in. Might as well just go and speak to Joe Aribo because he's your best bet for that.
Yeah, he likes us plucking at 60 yards at the air, doesn't he? As if he doesn't need sleep.
I think it's incredible. I'm trying to remember, there was one in particular. I don't know if it was maybe.
It was one, I think, it was at Celtic Park, I think, last December.
It came down with a NASA badge on it. And it's just taken it down and moved on. You're thinking, I'd just love to do that once. Just once.
I was going to say, I spoke to one of the boys that used to play Kinetic Academy, which is like an academy for sort of like inner city boys in London, and they used to call him, they used to call him Mr. Tickle. Because his arms and his legs are so like, the guy's like 10 yards in front of him and he just sticks at his legs like Inspector Gadget and just wins it back.
He's incredible. Do you know, actually, not that we're speaking directly about Joe Aribo, but do you know what constantly amazes me about, impresses me about him? you see him initially and you see the way he moves the ball and that kind of running style and his gait and all that, and you think, I'm just really worried he's going to be one of these guys who's not up for the physicality of it. Yeah. And then he absolutely is. His ability to force himself into positions, to force himself by defenders and putting in challenges is one of the highlights, actually. He's got all the talent, but it looks like he's also got the fight for it, as does Yanis Hadji, actually, has to be said.
I was just going to say, Aribo's like one of those boys, I think, that like his physique and his frame almost sort of like belies his like aggression and his power. Like, he's a powerful boy, but because he's so slight, probably people forget that he's not, because he moves in a languid way doesn't mean that he's no physical. I always think that's a really unfair criticism, that he somehow doesn't really put in a defensive shift. And I've not checked the numbers, but I'm pretty sure he's a regular. He regularly wins back the ball. He's I still think there's much more to get at him. It's just a case of what positions do you want to get him in? Where's his starting position? Because I think at the start of the season, when you saw them trial that in France, where it was sort of like playing a 3, but then him sort of a lot more forward on the left hand side. They've done that a few times, obviously, but he's so adaptable that I think the less instruction you give somebody like that, probably the better.
Yeah.
Jordan, you've sort of referenced physicality there a couple of times, and it takes us quite nicely on to Cedric Itten, who started at the weekend. I actually thought he led the line reasonably well at the weekend. I think with any striker, when he comes in after maybe a period of game time off the bench, you almost look at it as disappointed because he didn't score. But I actually thought he certainly worked hard. He's got a great work ethic around him, and I actually thought he played relatively well on Saturday afternoon.
No, I agree with that as well. I thought he did well at Hamilton, considering the limited service he got. Considering a lot of the balls are sort of pretty back to front, I thought he did really well with some nice touches. I thought he got himself into brilliant positions at times. I think right after the second half, I thought Rangers played really well for 10-15 minutes, could have killed the game. There wasn't massive chances, but there's big opportunities there where it was just a case of the timing of the final ball or whatever. But the thing I like about him is he's not going to run away from you at all. He's just not got that burst of pace, so he's always got to be really intelligent and give himself a head start. But I think he's really good when you saw people get on the half turn in the second half especially, and he just peels away, he knows when to hold his run and make the angle. I think his first touch as well, without going being good first touch for a big man, but he's he is really good. He's a good hold up player. I think the better the more dominant I think you are, the better he is, because again, he's not going to counter you, but I think if you can get the ball played into his feet around the box, he's got that good peripheral vision where he can take people's movement and just lay it around the corner or lay it off and spin. I think the deeper he comes and the longer he's got to think about it, he can get a wee bit sort of autopilot and looking at a wee bit slow to release it. So I think he's just a good penalty box striker, I think, but it's probably unfair to call him that because he's a really hard-working striker who leads the line himself. But I do think up with another striker, is what suits him the most. I think that's why Gerrard's probably used him as that sort of in off the right. Was it right 9? I think Gerrard called it. I think once he started twice against Kelly and they went a wee bit longer in, but it wasn't massive balls up to his head because I don't think he's not brilliant in the air. His game's about the ball into feet and bringing others into play. So I think it's St Gallen as well. They used to play that sort of split striker, and he would drift into that right channel. I think he's really good at that. A couple of times at the weekend, he probably too aware of the fact that he's not got that burst of pace, so he tries to wait and then shift it. Again, that's just adapting to Scottish football and the fact that you probably won't get that time at times. But the good thing is that unlike signings in recent years, he's had that time to bed in and it's not expected to score 30 goals in his first season. So no, I think he'll be quite happy, probably wanting to play a bit more football, but I think he's done well in the minutes he's been given.
Tommy, you reckon we will see a bit more of Itten after we get this league over the line, I think, don't you?
I think that would probably be fair, especially when you're maybe staring down the barrel of maybe Alfredo Morelos leaving. at the end of the season as well, who do you give the best farewell to? That said, it's all about getting these results first, and I'll take any 11 that can get me the results, any squad that can get me the results as well, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, it would make sense because he's been bought for the long term. He's still a bit of a project. He's young. He does have some rough edges. I think he's done reasonably well. I think the last couple of games that he's played, I agree, some things have worked, some things haven't. He is better drifting off into the channels. He's a relatively intelligent runner, but he's been hampered by a bit that the runners haven't been close enough to him as well. Some of his layoffs haven't been great. They've been a bit clunky, actually. And then it's just getting used to that. How is somebody going to bust from midfield over me? Who can I lay it back to? Can I get into the box? That type of stuff. Once that settles down. But yeah, he's a long-term option for us, whereas you're maybe looking at other members of the squad who aren't. That said, it would just be nice to actually turn up to a game where we don't have any of our strikers suspended. I'll happily take that at some point between now and the end of the season. But yeah, I think there's definitely a talent in there, and we will hopefully see even more of him next season as well. But yeah, he's shown what he can do in flashes. He had a good chance actually at the weekend where it just was a bit ponderous on shifting it out in the defender. I think similar to his goal in Europe where he shifted it and he kind of whipped it in the top of the net. He is a little bit languid on that, and his thought process seems to be a wee bit behind his feet sometimes. But young player, we'll take that all the time if we play to his strengths.
So Tommy, you spoke about maybe players going beyond that sort of figurehead up front. In this case, it was Cedric Itten. Last 2 weeks, or the last couple of games, Hamilton at Hamilton and then Kilmarnock at Ibrox at the weekend. We've seen a couple of cameo appearances from Scott Wright, and I have to say, I've been very impressed so far. Very impressed.
Yeah, he's looked. Well, do you know what? I'm going to say I've been all right impressed. Yes, I did see a lot on social media as well. People saying that he's been really, really good and stuff like that. And funnier, obviously, compared him to Sasa Papac because of the looks type of thing. But I think he's been all right in the cameos. But some of his decision making has been a bit poor as well.
Yeah,
not poor is maybe a little bit strong, but for example, the Hamilton game where he burst into the box when it was still 1-0, could have taken a shot on instead of trying to lay it off to Tav. At the weekend, once or twice where he could have maybe driven forward with the ball and he wants to lay it off. But that comes with it. Am I undermining the player? Absolutely not. He's young, Scottish, looks like a really good talent, really intelligent player, nice wee touches, doesn't seem to be too worried about putting himself about either. So again, for a really cheap business model, it's a bit cliched and a bit easy and lazy of me, but I'm going to do it anyway. Falls into that Glenn Kamara cheapness bucket. Yeah. But if that's what we can do, if we can pick up good emerging Scottish talent within the Scottish League for relative peanuts, technical phrase, and then get the best out of them before moving them on, all fantastic as far as I'm concerned. He looks like somebody who is immediately showing more than the likes of, let's say, a Jake Hasty or something like that.
Yeah.
Certainly looks like a more intelligent player than Jake Hasty, although I look forward to welcoming Jake Hasty and Glenn Middleton and all the rest of the players who are out on loan back to the squad at some point. Well, some of them. Actually, there's a couple maybe I wouldn't welcome back, but that's fair enough. Jordan,
so when we got Scott Wright on pre-contract, I think it was largely expected that there was a chance we would maybe not see him until the summer due to financial packages that was trying to get worked out, etc. And even when he did come in, I think a lot of people thought you're still not going to see a lot of him up until maybe the end of the year. However, he seems to have fitted in quite well to the ethos of the way that we play when he has been involved in these 2 substitute appearances.
I know, definitely. I mean, I was sad enough to actually go back and watch, I think maybe about 30 games or something, just to so I had a clue what I was talking about. But, as soon as you look at him, I think if you're looking for a player that would suit how Rangers play and for that position, then, he is tailor-made in terms of profile. That's not me saying he's going to come in and be a world beater and play 40 games a season, but does he suit the style? Yeah, and I think it probably suits him more than Aberdeen, even though at the start of the season I think they were playing a bit better football. But he's moved to a left winger into a more central attack midfielder, playing behind 2 strikers or playing two either side of the striker, so it's no too different. Obviously it'll be a lot more structured, but I actually think that'll help him where he's not floating around everywhere trying to get on the ball. I think, a bit of positional discipline and, teaching her how to play in the system. I think if you get him into those pockets, he's got electric pace for a standing start, and he's got that low centre of gravity that you want. I mean, like Kai Kennedy's obviously somebody I've spoken about, and that was one of the things that I said, you need to be sure that he's not going to end up blocking them. But I think when you look at, when Tommy was referencing like the players in those positions, you look at Wright and you look at Kennedy, and to me, you would rather have those two. And I think there's still plenty of room to bring in probably one or two more in the summer. But I think it was a good deal to get done early, especially when you had the McCrory sort of stick to use, and in fact that into negotiations. I think it was a smart deal for the club, and obviously getting him in, bedding him in, and the fact that he's eligible for Europa League as well. I think some people thought that he probably wouldn't be able to play because he'd played in the qualifiers for Aberdeen, but obviously that rule got changed a few years ago. So he did. He actually came on against one of the games I watched was Sporting Lisbon away, and came on as a sub and had a brilliant 20 minutes. So I think when you're looking at these type of players in Scotland, like, there's no dozens that are going to be able to make a step up, and Rangers are now sort of Europa League, hoping to get to Champions League level. So you've got to sign players that you think can come in at that level and add to it. Whether he will is obviously dependent on how he adapts and how he improves his game, because he's obviously got to develop. But I think he's got all the attributes if he can. He came back for that terrible injury, but I think most people are surprised that he didn't start. He didn't cement himself in Aberdeen's team a lot earlier. This is the first real season where he's been one of the mainstays. Again, to me, he just seems like if Kent needs taking out, you've now got somebody who you think you can put in and maybe rotate. Whereas there's I don't think the drop's probably as big as it has been at other times.
Jordan, I'm going to stick with you. Thursday we have the Europa League kicking back off again, so it's a break from league duty to big European game, of course, and we're back against Belgian opposition, of course, after taking care of Standard Liège. Antwerp, who I think are sitting above Standard Liège in their respective leagues just now. Do you think we can get by this two-legged affair? Do you think we'll get by Antwerp over the course of the piece?
I mean, it's hard to say because usually I like to watch the opposition in detail before I go to the game. But it's been busy trying to prepare for what is, without jinxing it, a title win, hopefully. So I've no time, but I know the coach there, Paterson, who used to manage Kilmarnock at Anderlecht. He's obviously really well respected, and he's a good reaction for the team, clearly, since he's gone in there. But I think he was talking about during the week the fact that they've got a bit of an injury problem or availability problem with the strikers. I think there's an ongoing issue with the strikers. I think it's Z, how you pronounce it, but they've obviously got a problem with that. But I think when the draw was made, you looked at some of the teams that Rangers could have got, and you would probably have been happy with that. Again, that's just using Liège as a sort of standard bearer, but they were a good side, Liège. I think, especially at Ibrox, I thought they were quite a test. So I don't think Belgian teams, the top Belgian teams, will be a walkover by any means. And Rangers, again, probably like last season, if you talked about the Rangers in the first half of the season when they were in the thick of Europe, I think you would probably think you fancy them, but they've obviously lost momentum a bit. And the thing I was always no arguing with people, but putting my side across in the first half of the season when it was the qualifiers, I was always talking about how I don't think they should look at European games as a sort of something to detract from them or disrupt the team. I actually think it sharpens them, because the domestic games tend to be so attack v defence most of the time, and it's repetitive and almost like you get too much time in the ball and you're on third. So I think that sort of task where you're constantly thinking and you're almost in a defensive mindset where Rangers just revert to the shape they've been using. I actually think that when you get into the thicket again and they're playing against these top teams, it actually does quicken their decision making and it sharpens up the football. So I always think that you've been seeing it last season when they were struggling and they produced that performance. Second half v Braga and in the away leg as well. So it could be one of these things that just almost cheesing them up again and giving them a bit of excitement, because playing behind closed doors can't be easy for players. So I definitely think it's something that sort of livens up the senses.
Tommy, the Europa League could prove to be a bit of a, I don't want to say a distraction, because I know exactly what you're going to say from a domestic perspective. Eye on the prize, and I get that. However, I just wonder how Steven Gerrard will view these games coming up against Antwerp as perhaps an opportunity to rotate even further, or does he see it as an opportunity to progress even further in the European stages?
It's an interesting one, and we referenced earlier, obviously, the income element to that as well, and the coefficient element of that. You are absolutely right, but I'll say it anyway. In terms of I'll take getting thumped off Royal Antwerp if it means I get my hands on the silverware that I really want at the end of the season. Right? No ifs, no buts, no maybes. That's it. But yeah, I think there will be some changes. We got really lucky because it's a short haul flight and stuff like that, and you don't want to, be getting any jet lag issues, and you particularly don't want to be getting a long flight when it's in the COVID era, shall we say. Antwerp, not a bad side. I think, as Jordan was saying, they're second in the Belgian league at the moment, though they might have played one more game than some other people. So I don't know if Belgium works the same as Scotland, where games in hand are just immediately classed as wins by some fans. I'm not entirely sure how that works in terms of Europe, but and I think they drew yesterday with Standard Liège 1 each, and were beaten by the league leaders Club Brugge, and they were beaten the week before by Club Brugge, who are leading the league as well.
3-1 it was, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, they're not an amazing kind of run at the moment, and Jordan's referenced some of the issues they've got with maybe some of their squad. But if I was Steven Gerrard, we want to win because it's a real tie that we can win, we can progress, and so I expect a strong team to be fielded home and away. But it would make sense to rotate where we can. One of the problems with that will probably be in Steven Gerrard's mind somewhere is, I tried the rotation at Hamilton for people to stake a claim and be able to say I can rely on them, and by and large they didn't. Well, to be fair, actually, when I'm saying that, I'm thinking particularly of Zungu, and I'm not picking on Zungu, but you're kind of waiting for a performance from him because everybody's behind him, and he wasn't able to do it at Hamilton. But maybe the European stage is a better place for him. I think there'll be some changes, not wholesale. Let's put it that way. I think you'll definitely see Morelos come back in though.
Yeah. So, Jordan, I think just the big thing for me is that we're now at a stage, because the Europa League is now back, we're going to go back to that, all things being well, sort of midweek, Sunday, midweek again. The further and further that you go in the tournament, in the Europa League, I think Steven Gerrard's going to be forced to rotate, and we could have, as Tommy says, a couple of these sort of Hamilton performances where the changes that are made maybe just don't bear fruit as you'd like them to.
I agree, but I don't look at when we were managing that sort of fixture load and earlier in the season, who's going to probably come in, Balogun for Hollander probably in terms of style, or you might have a Rebo playing instead of Hadji, just for that sort of more dynamism and at the European level. But is that? I don't really think that's sort of resting your player. Again, it comes back to the fact that there's that core group where it's hard to differentiate between first choice. You can put Kent, even Morelos. Now you could say, will Roof play off the right, or will Roof go play through the middle? I think if you're a betting person, you'd probably say Morelos with Roof on the right, but just to add that sort of potency at the top level. But you don't. If it's no Roof and it's Aribo, I don't think you look at that and think, oh, he's clearly rested this. Or if it's a domestic game, is it? Oh, he's looking forward to the European game. I just don't see it like that. I mean, I think they're so close to getting over the line now that it would be foolish to me not to have a proper crack at a tournament where you're in the last 32, anything could happen, and a lot of the big teams, there's a good few ties there where the bigger teams have drawn each other, and through that you don't know how open it could be, especially, and also don't want to put too much emphasis on the fact that it's a COVID season, but you've seen shocks happen. So you don't really know it'd be foolish to me, especially when, as we talked about earlier, how sort of transformative it could be if this season Rangers could sort of single-handedly drag Scotland as a sort of coefficient nation above Ukraine and seal that spot. I mean, that would be basically teeing up their own their own success next season, giving themselves another carrot to finish top. So I just see rotation probably. I would call it rotation on sort of, resting, mixing and matching for me.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that, sorry Scott,
okay.
Just the only thing I'd add to that, and you guys might agree or disagree, I think by and large when people think of changes or they get worried about the changes and stuff like that and performances dropping off, don't think they're talking or thinking about up front a Roof or a Morelos or an Itten and all that, which has tended to look after itself, and Itten obviously on the third tier of that, or playing people off the right or anything like that, or indeed Hilander for Balogun, or even a McLaughlin for McGregor. I think what really solidifies in their mind is the midfield.
Yeah,
that's the key area of change. And right now it's do you go with a Kamara, Jack, Davis? Where does Arfield fit in? What do you do with the Joe Rebo question? What about Zungu? Yeah, I think that's actually where the conversation lies. I think the other changes kind of look after themselves, and we've consistently seen there's no real drop off when those guys come in. It's just
I was just going to say that, Tom. I agree with that. But you look at the sort of what's been the European midfield, and you go Davis, Kamara, Jack. It's just so reliable. You just know, away from home, it's just going to deliver a solid performance. Obviously, Rangers are wanting more than that, but I think that's a great base in it. If you've got that base of 7 defending, I just think you can't really go wrong with it. Obviously, Arfield's just back after a layoff, so I think those three really complement each other really well, especially if you're fitting Roof and Morelos in, it just gives you that added sort of security behind it.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a huge testament to the squad that Steven Gerrard and his coaching staff have built this season, because you're very aware, and we spoke about this on the pod previously, Tommy, that if you are making changes, dropping midfielder or dropping one of the two that are playing out either side, it's quality for quality. Literally, you're not bringing in someone who isn't as good as the guy who's sitting it out. You're very aware that you're sort of replacing good with good as opposed to good with not quite as good. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, that consistency of performance. It's almost like football's a team game. You know what I mean? And that you need to have your standout performers. But what Rangers have been really good at, and the coaching's been really good at, and the assessment and analysis and transfer acumen has been really good at, and there's been a wee bit of luck throughout the season as well, is sourcing players who can get into the squad and fight for jerseys. And Gerrard and the team have been great at keeping people who've not been able to do that quite happy and out on the periphery. You've not heard a lot of bad noise. That's a skill and an art in itself. Yeah. But when people have come into the squad, by and large, right, 99% of the time, there's been no drop-off in individual or collective performance. And so we've managed to get through. And then a thread over the top of that is some of those players who've come in or had dips throughout the season or whatever have actually contributed. They've come in and they've nicked a goal. They've got the winner. They've blocked that shot. They've kept us in it. And actually, if you've got all the squad doing that and adding in and chipping in their wee bits throughout the season, all of a sudden you find yourself 4 wins from the title.
Yeah.
That's the importance of getting the right people in the squad, and shows you exactly what Steven Gerrard, by and large, was talking about when he said 3-year cycle. This is what people mean. Unless you've got a huge budget, you don't get the chance to overhaul a squad immediately. What you need to do is you need to build it brick by brick and iterate it. And once you get to version 3, you've got something that can stand up and really make a testament to itself. This is version 3 of the Steven Gerrard iteration, 4 wins from the title, and pretty much everybody in that squad has contributed by and large. That's a great news story.
So listen, we're just about done for another week. Before we do go, Jordan, I'm going to come back to you and ask you, how's it felt as a journalist covering Rangers this season, based on everything that we knew the season was going to be? Stopping 10 in a row, getting our 55th, which was obviously all the focus that we were looking after. But taking into account the sort of previous seasons and the times that you've been doing your role, particularly at Athletic, how have you found it this season?
It's a weird one that people always ask you, because obviously, like, you know, as journalists, like, we're obviously really lucky to be able to still go to games. So it's a strange one, sort of sitting in an empty stadium and just seeing banners and seats and sort of none of the normal sounds that you associate with a football game. Even the smell. Like, the only game that the last game you sort of up was the Leverkusen, or before that was Hamilton, where, you know, it was just, it turned so toxic at the end, and you sitting where the press usually sit, you can just sort of hear just how unhappy people were in the last 20 minutes of that game. So to go for that as your sort of last memory of what a normal sort of league game looks like, to then sitting and it's just like just stripped back, and it's essentially just it's putting it simply, but it's hard to describe it any other way than sort of you could be somewhere else watching it. You could be anywhere at a park watching it, essentially, because it just is so stripped back. And the one thing I've enjoyed is hearing people like Connor Goldson or hearing the tactical instructions going. That I've tried to, they've moved us further back up the stadium at games, so it's harder to hear now. I don't know if that's because I was hearing too much or whatever, but it's definitely interesting hearing like people, for example, sitting a bit higher up, get an elevated view, and then the players sort of communicating with each other or having a go at the refs. Always quite funny. But apart from those sort of highlights, like, it's just not the same. You know what I mean? Like, you can just see it almost. The game just goes into a lull. Where especially if one team's comfortable, there's just not that. There's always usually sort of to and fro in games, whereas it can be just constant. As much as that is the team performing well, I think especially at away grounds as well, like, teams just don't have that sort of that guttural reaction where they're spurred on for 15, 20 minutes and get on top. So I think the best coached teams, it might be wrong, but it does seem to me like the teams who are coached to within an inch of their life and who really can just play the football and concentrate on what they've worked on for 3 years in Rangers' case, like, it seems to me that they thrive in these sort of under these sort of conditions, because they're not relying on anything else to motivate them or produce a reaction. I mean, that might be putting it simply, but I think that's one of the factors which Rangers have coped well with, is just playing their own game. And I think it's probably helped their calmness as well in terms of breaking teams down, because they've not got the fans on their back when they get edgy. At the same time, they've probably not got that sharpness or that adrenaline pumping through them. But I think it works both ways. But as a journalist, like, it's covering Rangers, the easier your job is the better they're doing. So of course you hope that they win every game, because it's easier for you to write about. No, it's been a great season to cover Rangers in terms of the football. So you can't complain when they've not lost all season in the league.
I think from a personal point of view, I'm incredibly envious the fact that he's actually getting to go back and forward to the games this season. Tommy, have you not?
Absolutely. I wake up dreaming about my seat, sitting there freezing. Although I would say, when you see the smells of the game, I think you're maybe thinking of a different club. But maybe I'm wrong there. Answers in the comments. No, but no, I think we all miss it. There's nobody who is lucky enough to be able to get to games, in normal circumstances, but paying for it, who doesn't miss it as well. Thankfully, Rangers have been really good in terms of the RTV coverage and really uplifted some of that. And to Jordan's wider point there, it's been a really thrilling season and a good season for us so far. Fingers crossed, all that kind of 4-game boilerplate wording again. And let's just hope that it ends with what we're all hoping for, which is a myriad of social media videos of people partying in the house and various different Rangers get-ups, because that's what we're all looking for, And then we'll finally get back to that stadium that we were talking about, that has went through all those enhancements and is no longer dilapidated. And hopefully, most importantly, there's a wee space that's been filled on the wall next to Bill Struth with an extra wee mini flag put right next to it. That's what we're all hoping for. So fingers crossed for it.
Here. We should say just a couple of things before I let you guys disappear for the pod this week. Rangers have been good enough to give us access to the women's team. So at some point in March, early March, we reckon. We're very pleased to announce that we'll be releasing the women's pod. So Tommy and I will have some coverage to cover as far as the women's pod's concerned. So really looking forward to that, and more details to come via all our social channels as time goes by. I should also say that last week, This Was Ibrox was 1 year old, incredibly. It's hard to believe that we've been getting away with it for 12 months, frankly. We've managed, and we should say a huge thank you to everyone that's followed us, all our guests that have been on, and all the people behind the scenes. I look at our editor Adam, Sam, Billy, myself, Tommy, Willie. We're hugely grateful for the support we've had, both in and around the media in Scotland and people closely connected with the club. So we've been very fortunate a year, and fingers crossed we continue to go from strength to strength, Mr. McIntyre.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't put it any better myself. Really, really thankful to everybody who's helped contribute to it, and we've managed to do a full year having never ever been in the same room. I know,
it's incredible, isn't it?
That's the secret to our success, that nobody's got up close and personal yet with a disagreement.
I hope we're in lockdown for another year then.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Kill the vibe when you actually need to be within touch and distance of each other, you know what I mean?
Exactly. That's when it'll all fall apart. But no, listen, we've been very lucky. We've been well received by the fans, by media people such as yourself, Jordan, by our guests, ex-players, people like Dave King as well, and indeed the club itself. So yeah, thanks to all, and let's hope that our first season is also our first, not the club's first league title. Just want to be really clear about that last part.
Jordan, listen, I appreciate you coming on and joining us in the pod again. We'll try and get you on for a hat-trick, perhaps before the end of the season.
Don't leave it another year. That's it. Congratulations on the milestone, and thanks for having me on. It's always a good listen. So apart from when I'm on, of course. So well, you might want to leave it for another year, maybe. I don't know. You can tell me.
So Tommy. You'll be free to join us next week. I think Willie Boyd will be sort of free in his diary for us next week as well.
Yes, back on. That's me back. I've had my holiday. I'm back now.
Sabbatical over.
Yeah, that's it. Just in time for. I'm just a glory hunter. I'm just in time for the league run-in. I'm back.
Listen, next week.
I'm going to slowly take bits of it off. So by the time we're due to win it, I'll just be sitting here with a task and a Magnum PI style.
This week's pod will be available across all of our usual channels, Acast, Spotify and YouTube. By all means, leave a comment in there, and please, again, subscribe to all the good things that we do. Good luck to Rangers on Thursday against Antwerp, and Sunday at home to Dundee United, which we will cover next Monday night, and then look ahead to the next leg of the Europa League. Good luck to Rangers, and we'll do it all again next week. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Like an animal, something so physical. Burn it down. Let your fear out. Let your fear out.
You're listening to This Is Ibrox, your Rangers podcast, brought to you by Triple H Mortgages, the one-stop shop for all your mortgage and mortgage insurance needs. Contact them on 01453 88 7179 or via email hello@hhhmortgages.com.